Hello, 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 and welcome to the Inspired Risk podcast. I am your host, Elizabeth Cordova, and I am so excited to be here today talking to you about money. I want to get real with y'all this month. Every time that I have kind of thought about what is it that I want to record, what is it that I am just feeling really resonant and present on my own heart, the thing that has bubbled up to the surface has been dollar bills, y'all. And so I want to do maybe like a little bit of storytelling, maybe a little bit of my own personal experience going from living and working in Vietnam and just like hustling in side jobs and piecing together, like making ends meet, to moving into corporate America, living in New York, working for a finance company, to starting my own business and moving into entrepreneurship and sort of navigating the financial like roller coaster that is. Because if we're being totally transparent, which it's my podcast and I want to be totally transparent, I am still figuring out how to, maybe not figuring out, I shouldn't say figuring it out. That's kind of the wrong emphasis. I'm still learning, I am still evolving myself to have the identity that I can be somebody who fully supports themselves and all of their financial needs through entrepreneurship and through offering my gifts. And so I wanted to just do a like real time check-in update and have this be almost like a mile marker in my journey, because I know that the moment that I'm in currently is a starting place and is absolutely going to be something that I look back on and think, LOL, remember when I didn't know how to make $250,000 a year with my gifts? That version of me, she was so sweet. She was so precious in all that she was learning. And I love just being a living document and having this process be something that um, can be made for our collective use. So that is a little bit of my intention today. That is a little bit about where my heart is at. And I would love to start with a grounding meditation, if you'll indulge me, if you'll join me. If you have the ability and are safe to close down your eyes ever so gently. If you can just take a moment here to pause whatever it is that you are doing to ground more deeply into your body, to tell our brains, hello, brain, my sweet, sweet friend, I love you and your ability to problem solve so much. And in this moment, I'm going to send my energy towards my heart space so that my heart can begin to open up, almost like a set of French doors or really cute little window dressing. We're opening up so that we can allow our intuitive wisdom space, so that we can allow the message coming through this podcast to really land in the heart space, where it can be transmuted and transformed into something that perhaps the brain can choose to take action on. But for right now, for these first few minutes of the pod, we are just setting our intention to be open. As the podcast host, I am setting my intention to be a loving channel. I am opening up my own intuition and inviting my ego to step to the side so that I can be here to provide a service, to share my truth, to share my love, and to speak and be as resonant as I possibly can. I trust that the people who are here for this podcast will receive exactly the nourishment and the information that they need. And so, with that declared, if you want to take a couple of deep breaths in through the nose and out through the mouth. Let's take 2 more just like that, in through the nose and out through the mouth. Maybe you let go of an audible sigh. Maybe you release some noise from your throat, helping you to release anything that doesn't need to be held in the body anymore. Let's take our last deep breath in through the nose and sigh it out. And if you closed your eyes, you can gently open them back up again. If you are watching on YouTube, I'm waving, I'm saying hello to you, sweet angel. And I don't know, I have this deck of cards next to me, and it's not a tarot deck. It is an oracle deck that was created by a local artist in New York. And it's really cool because it was actually, she was getting her MFA, and it's all collage, but like really, really interesting collage pieces. It's like, I want to say every image is cut from Nat Geo. And so there's like a very sort of scientific feel to the imagery, but the way that the artist has combined them is like extremely disorienting. The scale and the layering is really, really interesting. And then there's a little guidebook. And so I don't know, I just feel a little bit inspired, a little bit intrigued to do a collective card pull for us as we start. And if you're listening and you're not watching on YouTube or on video, trust that I will do my best to describe, but maybe I'll also post a picture on my Instagram or something so that you can see what the card looks like. I'm going to close my eyes again and just feel into the energy of the cards. I'm going to ask that the message that is the most supportive, the most beneficial, the thing that maybe the audience needs to hear the most in this moment, be the thing that comes through right now. And maybe we will anchor this around some specificity, and maybe we will name that as money, because that's the topic of today's conversation. And so this is the funky card that I have chosen. And I realize now that when I said I was going to attempt to describe it, I really kind of did myself dirty. It looks like a space station or a part of a rocket, like a golden sort of mushroom glowy top and white cylindrical body, inner layered with maybe like background of a glacier, perhaps, or a wave. I'm not entirely sure what we're looking at, and that's okay, to be honest. I'm going to see if I can find the download in the book. And this is what it says. My voice is resounding with metallic vibration. I echolocate myself within continuous deformation. This is the void we were asking for. What is cognition with no center? How close can I get to alien perception? Rewrite your algorithm, navigate with sound. And then, okay, so it looks like the title of this card is Automation. And it says, machine intelligence can be seen as a pinnacle of Western humanist achievement. By creating a thinking machine in our own image, human refies its godlike status by externalizing its capacity for knowing into one of its own creations. This is the same capacity for knowing that humanity has long used to distinguish itself from everything else, as determined by its own perspective. Machine intelligence can simultaneously be seen as that which undercuts the humanist doctrine by equalizing the agency of all material interactions. If intelligent assemblages of metal and plastic can come to know themselves by roving through intelligent cityscapes of metal and plastic, it becomes harder to sentimentalize our methods of sensing and processing as we move. When a machine speaks its own language, interacts with an insect, and creates or destroys on its own terms, we face an utterly alien and relational interiority that is forever beyond our own understanding. These ethical and existential implications prompt us to trace the infinite unknowns laying beyond our own claims to intelligence, including an entire past, present, and future of other than human and networked points of view. I'm furiously blinking into the camera because this is pretty heady prose, I think. And I love the way that it's written. I love that it's heady prose. I'm an English major, and so I find the specificity of the language that this artist uses to be really interesting. It really like pulls on my brain. And it's interesting because I prompted the deck to speak to us, if it can, about money. And what I'm getting from this reading is that money is something that we have also created in the same way that we have created machine intelligence, which is a lot of what this card is about. And what is wild to me is that money is a million things. It is an energy. It is, you know, a credit card. It is a tactile form of defining value. It is currency, right, to be exchanged for goods and services. And for some people, it is very alien. Money is very confusing. Money has its own complicated language, and some people in life go through this human experience without ever really becoming intimate with money, without ever having a good relationship with money. It's always maybe fraught with not having. And I think that that's resonating for me because that is how I grew up. I felt like for me, money was always foreign and out of reach. And it was something that other people had access to, but that I genuinely did not. And I remember growing up in the Bible Belt of Texas. I'm from Flower Mound, Texas, and I split my childhood between El Paso, Texas, which is the border. It's a border town, and I'm half Mexican, and Flower Mound, which is like suburban Dallas. But I grew up the eldest daughter of a single mom. And in Flower Mound, we lived in an area that was, I think, had a pretty high income, median income. But I was from the neighborhood on the wrong side of the tracks. And so I would go to school and see people getting dropped off in fancy cars and see, you know, people wearing shiny new things and having lunch money and having money for extracurricular activities and getting cars, as soon as they turn 16, and I was invited to friends' houses and they were beautiful homes. And I couldn't understand why my upbringing was not the same experience. And it made me feel really angry, to be honest. It really made me confused and mad because we would go to church and they were constantly preaching, if you are close to God, then God will bless you with material things. And if you, give your little 10% tithe, then you can expect to experience the will of God and the love of God in a very tangible way. I felt like I was praying earnestly. I felt like I did really truly believe in the word of Jesus, and yet was in a home that was constantly struggling to make ends meet. And I remember my mom borrowing money from me because I worked a part-time job when I was growing up, and I remember feeling like the responsible adult, in the household when I was 16 years old. And I remember being really confused as why other people could afford things and we couldn't. And now looking back, obviously, I have a lot more life experience. I think about my mom, who was pregnant with me when she was 19 and then had me when she was 20. And also, she didn't have any family support. And she moved away from her home because of a job and was doing the best that she could for myself and for my younger brother. But I know if I was trying to raise kids at the age of, 20 to 28, 30, like I also would probably not have like the best financial security. And so I can look back now with a lot of grace and understand that my mom was really just trying to like keep us with the clothes on our back. But that initial sort of relationship and dynamic to money, where it felt to me like something that only other people could have, or something that I had to like really work and kill myself and strive for, because that was also a big part of the messaging, was like, well, if you work hard, then you'll make money. This was reinforced to me because my grandparents have an ad agency, and my grandpa worked there from the time that he was, early 20s as a copywriter, and is one of the hardest working people I know. And together, he and my grandma both worked from the time that they were quite young so that they could eventually come to own this ad agency. And they did have some financial security and wealth. So there were these like two sort of parallel stories that I was taking in from the time I was born, which was, number one, if you work hard, then you can make money. And number two, if if God is happy enough with you, then you can have money. None of that really worked for me, at least not for the long term, because I moved to Vietnam when I was like 22, straight out of college. Moving to Vietnam at the age of 22 really like changed the trajectory of my whole life and absolutely altered my perspective on how it is that I could make money. Because I moved to Vietnam thinking that I was just going to be there for a year, thinking this was like a gap year situation, and then immediately like fell in love with the lifestyle and the culture in Southeast Asia and decided to stay. And the thing about it, working in Vietnam as like a Westerner, is immigrant was that I didn't have as much access to like traditional sources of income because my work visa was tied to my teaching job. I had to like work under the table if I wanted to supplement my income. And I started meeting pockets and communities of, I guess now we would call them like digital nomads, but in 20 like 2014, 2015, this was like a much less popularized lifestyle. But they were there in Vietnam, the digital nomads. They were definitely there, and they were definitely exposing me to new ways of making money that were not like working for a dollar amount per hour. You know, it wasn't that they were selling their time, it was that they were learning to leverage their expertise to make money. And that like blew my mind as a 22-year old. I was kind of like, what do you mean you don't have to just like clock in and then clock out and the exchange is just, you know, $12 or whatever an hour? What do you mean I can just like set up this website and people will buy things and I can check on it, you know, 2 or 3 times a day, and that can be the thing that like supplements my income? While I never got into like drop shipping, or I never really had an online like e-commerce business, I was exposed to people who were getting really creative with ways in which they could make money. And this started to just like rewire a little bit my perspective on possibility and the possibilities of earning a good income. I never struggled for money when I lived in Vietnam. There was always another sort of hustle, not even hustle, because I mostly did teaching, tutoring, and events planning and like marketing consulting. But I was always just like piecemealing multiple part time jobs together according to my own schedule, according to my own, you know, I was always my own boss, and I loved it. I really really loved it. I never, from the time that I graduated, I didn't have like a real boss at a real job until I was probably 28. And at that point I started working for a co-working facility, and I was managing 3 co-working buildings. And this was an international company, so they were based out of Hong Kong, and I had a CEO and a founder who was like pretty awful and toxic. But that was my first time ever really like working in a company, so to speak. And what was challenging about that was that I placed so much of my self-worth in this other person's hands, in the hands of my boss, because it was like I loved getting the validation that I was doing a good job. I loved the like pats on the back and the raises and the bonuses, and there was just a lot of external validation that was tied to money that I was sort of just like feeding off of. What's wild is that it doesn't last. When you're maybe like your worthiness is based off of external validation, as soon as that external validation goes away or wavers, in the case in my case, this person was like deeply narcissistic. And so it was like this constant battle between like pleasing them and having them like ring me out and yell at me. And I don't know necessarily the biggest takeaway, except to say that I learned that working for someone else, and that I have a tendency to really overgive. Because if that validation doesn't come, then I take it as a personal attack that I'm doing something wrong. And when the validation does come, it usually used to come with money. And so I would like very closely associate those two things. And this was pretty detrimental to my mental health, if you can imagine, because as soon as I changed positions and started getting into entrepreneurship, the first business that I really ever had was a collaboration between my friend Levy and I. She's a DJ. She's still a DJ. Hey, Levy. And myself. And so we planned and hosted like fabulous events and parties in Saigon. We founded the company, or maybe I should say, I came on as like her head of operations and co-founder in January of 2020. And then 3 months later, March of 2020, everything was shut down. There were no more gatherings, there were no more events, there were no more parties. Then there was no more work, then there was no more money, and there was no more validation, and there was no more getting my self-worth from the dollars in my bank account and from the approval of my collaborators and clients. And it was not good for my heart and my soul because I didn't know how to like take care of myself without that external validation. And it's an ongoing journey. Like I am literally still navigating this because basically what ended up happening was that I stayed in Vietnam until August of 2020 without a job in lockdown, in COVID lockdown in Asia, and then moved back to the States and hated it. I did not want to live in America, but there I didn't have a job in Vietnam. So at some point I ran out of my savings and I was like, okay, it's time to go. And I started working for a marketing agency in the States and eventually moved to New York and started working in marketing for a finance company and was making great money, was living in a place that I really loved, was doing work that I really truly enjoyed, but it was not satisfying my soul. I knew in my heart of hearts that this job is not your purpose. This figuring out the marketing for an investment company is not your purpose. And I had to recognize that I was sticking around at this job and burning myself out. Literally, I was very ill at the end of my tenure at this place because number one, I was worried that I wasn't going to be able to support myself any other way in New York with the lifestyle that we were living. Number two, because I love when other people tell me good job. I love when other people confirm and affirm like you're doing great, you're smart, we need you, the team really values you, like all of that. I was on a pedestal, like high above my own physical health, and it really started to take a toll. And eventually, after almost 3 years at this company, I was laid off, and like I swear, I think there were 6 rounds of layoffs, and I was the 6th round of layoff. I was really actually quite grateful at the time because it meant that I would get severance, not a lot, but a bit, that I would have the time to learn how to make money offering my real gifts and my services. And it just didn't go as planned. It just didn't go as planned, which is okay because what unfolded is what needed to unfold. I was laid off in October of 2024, immediately went to Italy. Like, literally, I think I was laid off on Wednesday and we went to Italy like on Saturday because our friends were getting married. And so we had this vacation booked and planned. Did 2 weeks in Italy. Then we did a week in England because we went to go see Matt's family. And from England, I decided to go back to Vietnam for a couple of months to see my friends and to just like recover and heal from burnout because I was quite ill. And I got to Vietnam and decided that I wasn't going to apply for any more full-time jobs, that I was just going to give myself as much time as I needed. I had about maybe 60K saved that I had budgeted that would get me like maybe 8 months. I would give myself this time to really try to make my business work. I went back to New York in at Christmas so like December 2024, and then gave myself the month of January to start to see what I could make happen. And then maybe like middle of January, I got the news that my grandma was going to die. And that just wrecked me. Like, absolutely, absolutely wrecked me. She had been having stomach pain. And so they went to the doctor. And turns out she had stage 4 cancer all through basically all of her main organs. And they estimated like 3 months. And this grandma was like my soulmate in a lot of ways. I'm named after her. We've always been extremely close. And so I went to see her in February and said my goodbye on Valentine's Day. And then I came back to New York and I was dealing with such tremendous grief and sadness and anger and confusion and heartbreak. And at the same time, in my romantic relationship with my husband, like we were just going through some growing pains together. And so it was all just like present and loud, and making money was like not something that I had the mental space for. I tried. I really tried. I was throwing spaghetti at the wall in terms of my offerings. I was having some success with selling my astrology readings, selling my tarot readings. I really only made sales to people who met me in person and then would sort of like get to know my energy and then decide that they wanted to learn more from me. But in terms of like making it work on the internet and finding a lucrative marketing channel, just like wasn't happening. And I didn't have any like real considered methodology or practice, nor did I, mainly because I just didn't have the emotional space to deal with it. And there was a lot of trauma that I was also recovering and healing in real time with the death of my grandma. It brought up a lot of damage that had occurred between me and other family members, specifically my dad, when I was growing up. And one thing that was really beautiful about my grandma's passing was the amount of reconnection and reconciliation that I was able to have with my dad. But all of that really became the priority. I was not focused on my business and I was not really making money. I ended up liquidating, I guess I would say, my 401k, which is not, this is not financial advice. I would not, this is not financial advice. This is just me honoring what I actually had to do. And I felt so much shame about that because I knew that, oh, there's penalties and oh, there's, maybe you should just take out a loan. And, there's all of these narratives sort of around like what you should and shouldn't do. And so I felt like fiscally this is probably not my wisest choice, but I didn't really know any other way. And I didn't want to take out a loan. That felt really much more risky. And so I just kept trying. And I did have some periods of miraculous kind of success. I did have some big ticket clients that came through that helped me stay afloat. And at the end of 2025, because this is all January 2025 to December 2025, the end of 2025, I took on a limited marketing consulting gig, which is still now in June how I am paying my rent. I'm still not supporting myself and my lifestyle through my business. I think part of the reason that I feel really neutral to share this, which is good, which is what I would encourage. I don't ever want to come on here and be like weepy and upset and very much like in the sorrow of not having the financial means that frankly are necessary. But because I am in this place of acceptance and neutrality, I think it's valuable to share 40 minutes of backstory so that I can say, this isn't something that I feel that artists and entrepreneurs should be ashamed about. I am currently in about $6,000 of credit card debt, which I've literally never had debt in my whole life. I was fortunate enough to get a full scholarship, full academic scholarship to college. And then I worked. And so I had enough money to move to Vietnam. And then I was fine once I got to Vietnam, basically. And then when we came back to New York, my mom was able to give us $10,000 to help with the moving costs and to pay our apartment deposit. And that is significant. My mom inherited money from her mom when she died, and so and worked a lot. Had I think once my brother and I had graduated high school and moved out, she was able to save. And so I remember when she gave Matt and I that $10,000, like crying on the phone because I was like, remember when you used to borrow money from me? Remember when I used to, like, I had to cancel my dance classes because we couldn't afford it? Remember when I ate ramen for dinner every night because that was all that was in the pantry? Like, it was wild when she was able to give us that money, and I was so grateful. But other than that, and I will say that both of my parents, since we're older now, have, they paid for my flights to go to Texas when my grandma was dying. And at Christmas and, for some other occasions. And so it's not that I have zero family support. And I think it's important to acknowledge that as well. But for the first time in my life, I have some credit card debt. And it is, for the most part, pretty intentional spending. There are probably some things that I could have done without, but I don't know. There is also this part of me when I think about the alien nature of money, like this card sort of brought into the conversation is like when I am really deep in a like soul meditation and deeply connected to the truth of what it is to be a soul having a human experience, there is this duality of like on earth, money is on this iteration of earth that we are in, money is important because it is how we exchange means in order to have our needs met. And so there is absolutely that truth, which is that it would be very, 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 very hard for me in the society that I live in to just like not have any money and to stop earning an income. And then there's this other side when I am deep in meditation, when I am deeply connected to my soul and sort of like the infinity of my soul that is like, ha ha ha, you silly humans, you are so concerned with this this symbol, this dollar amount in your bank account, and you let it dictate and determine your capacity for joy and your capacity for like righteousness, self-righteousness in some ways, that it's baffling to the soul sometimes. And so I'm really learning to try to operate within this duality of like, money is absolutely important and is absolutely something that I want to continue to cultivate and to grow. My philosophy since I have been, I don't know, 16 or 17 years old was like, I want to live how other people vacation. I want that siesta culture. I do not want to hustle and force and grind and like kill myself to make a living. I want to really enjoy the work that I'm doing and I want to be compensated for it. And there's this other part of me that's like, okay, well, if that's what it takes to get there, I'm not going to let this I will define it as meager for myself because everything is relative. This meager amount of credit card debt from continuing to invest in myself and in my business. If I were a large corporation, there would probably be investors and I would probably not have to be profitable until like year 3, 4, 5. I worked at a startup for many, many years and they turned over millions and millions and millions of dollars in revenue, and yet they were still not profitable. And so I'm here to be a wise steward for my finances. I'm here to be a wise giver and sharer and exchanger of money. I want to be, and I am, a deeply generous person. And so that is part of the reason that having money is really important to me. And I want to just be honest that I'm currently navigating my way towards profitability and financial freedom. And if that is where you are as well, like, you do not have to let that bring you into an experience of shame. Because the other part of this is that this is, especially in America, a deeply systemic issue that we don't have government and societal supports in the way that I believe that we should. There is no universal basic income. There is no housing as a right or food as a right or healthcare as a right. And so, and the system of capitalism is by definition extractive. And we put those in power. The people that we have put in power are the ones who have had the most success extracting the most. It is no surprise that the people in the lower section of the financial abundance chart are struggling to build wealth, because that is how this society has been constructed, is to keep us impoverished so that we have to continue to abide and listen and play by the rules set by the people in power. And so let me at least free myself from the shackles of shame, because some of this really has nothing to do with me. And I think that that is a good place to end money conversation number 1. there will, I know, be updates to this as I continue to learn and evolve and hold the identity of somebody who is wealthy and knows their worth and is well compensated for living their purpose. I know that as I continue to develop myself into the identity of someone who lives like they are on vacation, that um, I'm meant to do that in order to inspire others to become more free. So hopefully this was interesting and enlightening, and I would love to continue the conversation if you have a personal story or experience or opinion, or if there's just something that you want to get off your chest to help alleviate some of the shame that you might be feeling around money, that is absolutely welcome here on YouTube, in my DMs, wherever it is that you feel safe chatting. Just know that I'm open to it. And if you have enjoyed this ramble, perhaps I would say, and are interested in learning more either about me or about what it means to live a life of inspired risk and start to build a culture where we are helping each other to become more free, then I would invite you to please like and subscribe this show on YouTube or Spotify or Apple, wherever it is that you're listening or watching. Give it a 5-star rating. I am a one woman show with my dear creative producer, Marty. So between the two of us, we are working really hard to get this out to you guys every month, 3 episodes. And the only way that we can continue to do this is if there is receptivity for it, if there's an audience. So please like, please share, please rate, please send me a heart on Instagram so that I know that this reached you and that you loved it. Until next time, have a beautiful rest of your day.